Hey, welcome to YouTube. Taking used to getting used to. It's getting. Let me start all over again. It's trying to get used to the name change. I'm not on. Oh, okay. Trying to get. Okay, I'm talking. Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Okay. Joe said he couldn't hear me. That's why.
Bill, if you can hear us, we can't hear you.
I can hear you.
yeah, I can hear you all.
Tony can hear me. John can hear me. Yeah. Here we go. Anyway, welcome to Into the Train Room with Joe Desmond tonight. And his special guest is Tony Bowen. You guys may remember him from the last time he was on. Tony was a wealth of knowledge.
Well, I don't know about that.
Yeah, and much better looking than Joe.
That
First
I
and
would agree
foremost,
with.
yeah, well, first and foremost, we do want to apologize for the lateness of coming on 9/11, my time, Eastern Standard Time. We had a couple of technical glitches.
Oh, yeah.
It took us a while to get here, but we are here, and it's April 17th, 2019, and welcome to Model Railroading Live. As I started earlier, I went back to the YouTube Model Builders logo and the opening spiel, so I do apologize for that. It takes time to, acclimate myself as well as the rest of us to a name change, and just before we start and Joe takes over with his show tonight, Into Joe's Train Room, just want to say that we have two shows left on the schedule, both of them being Johnny's Train Room, and that will be tomorrow night at 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And so the apparently the potbelly stove has been extinguished, but I think with the weather, I don't know what it's that like in Johnny's Train Room down there in Georgia, but we're having a little bit of inclement weather up here in the Northeast and on the New York area, and it's been a little chilly. So the checkerboard might be out there, and you guys are invited to come in and partake and mosey on up and talk about trains. And if you have a problem with anything that's going on in your trains, or you want to share something that you're doing that's extraordinary, and everything that we do is extraordinary in this hobby. So, and you want to share that, by all means, please join into Johnny's Train Room, Johnny's Train Talk Show at 10 p.m. Eastern Time. I think you guys will really, really enjoy it. And I'm sorry, what, John? Uh, okay, can anybody see the picture? I'm asking because I got it. I got it on my phone now, so I got the Q&A. So can anybody? Can you guys see us? Can you see me? Can you see Joe? And can you see Tony? Nobody's answered me so far, so I'm making the assumption that they can until otherwise. Oh, they can. John Dilly says he can see us. Low Archer says, I see all of you. Okay, so there we go. We can be seen and heard. So that's a good thing. So without,
Yeah. That was
Okay.
my fault. I stepped on my headphone cord.
Okay, Joe, Mr. Desmond stepped on a train, his cord, and disconnected, and he's the one that threw everything into a chaos situation.
It's very chaotic today.
Yeah. Well, anyway, he's. Let me reiterate. We're here tonight with Joe Desmond and our special guest Tony Bowen. Tony's been on the show before with Joe, Into Joe's Train Room, and like I said earlier, a wealth of knowledge, better looking than Joe, has more knowledge than Joe, knows a lot more than Joe. And quite honestly, Tony, I don't know why we don't have Into Tony's Train Room, but it's the deal we made and the contract we signed up until 2027, I think. So, but anyway, we love you, Joe.
What can I do?
I love you like a brother. Not necessarily my brother, but I love you like a brother.
I know. I understand. I like you too, Bill.
Anyway, no further ado. Here's Joe Desmond, and with our special guest Tony Bowen, I'll take care of the Q&A, and you guys do what you do best: entertain us.
You're the man, Bill. So hello, everyone, and welcome to Model Model Railroad Live, and it's really cool. We're gonna new name, same good faces, same good content. It's pretty cool getting off to their new start. So for our continuing operations series, what I wanted to do tonight is I wanted to go over the term. A lot of people use that term. Excuse me. What is it? The local turn is kind of the title itself kind of describes it. It's a train that originates out of a yard, goes out to a certain area, does some work, turns around and goes back. A lot of you may know that as the local. Those two terms are used synonymously. And I just wanted to get in here and show everybody how to do a local or a turn, depending on what you call it. And I figured nice little opposing viewpoint. I'll do a more modern Conrail local. And I brought my good friend Tony in here to show you how he does the local on the Rock Island. And our year, Tony, refresh my memory, is
1950 to about 1959. So anywhere in the 50s.
So in a good... Even though Tony models the Rock Island, they are out of transition. It's right in that transition period. So I think that would be a good opposing viewpoint. Tony, why don't you take it away? How do you run your local operations?
Well, with my layout being multi-deck, I have two locals when it comes to a normal operating session. They both coincide at a staging yard to take cars in and out of, but essentially they start in the layout room. And so tonight I had just picked the lower deck local that I call the Homestead local. It starts at Homestead, Iowa, goes to South Amana, Marengo, Ladora, and then into our staging area that's called Carnforth Yard. And essentially, just like a regular manifest train, train orders are written up right at the beginning of the session that gives that authority of saying, okay, you're doing work from Homestead to Carnforth, but knowing that there's other mainline traffic that could be on the railroad at any time. So it's obviously very important for that local to get in the siding, always make sure that that caboose is protected, make sure that front end is protected also. The other thing is the local, the thing I really enjoy about it is the variety of length of that train. Sometimes that local might start at Homestead and has 10 cars. Okay. It might get into Carnforth and have 18, and it's struggling to make it up the hills to get there. So then that adds that element of, oh, you got to double the hill. You're not going to make it with this power. And true to life, that's what happened to the railroads, that if you were out there and you usually a local, at least for my era, was the same assigned power, usually the same assigned crew. You didn't have anything else to draw on. You didn't have any other locomotives. And so sometimes there is that element of you're doubling to get that train over the road.
Okay. I'm going to interrupt you there, Tony. So for our newcomers out there, can you tell everybody what doubling is? Doubling the hill?
So let's say the maximum train length is, let's say, 15 cars, and all of a sudden that's all these two locomotives will hold or pull, and you've got 30. So you essentially put those other 15 cars in the siding. You take the first 15 and the caboose to the home terminus, and then you come back with just your caboose and your locomotive. You take that other section of 15 cars and you take them right back to that home terminus. So you get the whole train there, but essentially you got to do it in shifts. So you're doubling it to get it there. So that's an element of the local that I prefer. Now, some of my crews, when they operate, they sometimes have some colorful language to maybe describe what they think of it. But either way, the job's got to get done. And the nice thing about the local, and I'm going from the experience of having, a great-grandfather, a grandpa, and an uncle that worked for the railroad, is that they prefer the local. They like the local because you got to associate and socialize with a lot of these small town, elevators and bulk oil and that. And it was nothing at Christmas time, like from my grandpa, that, elevator might need one car switched. Well, a lot of railroads today wouldn't mess with that.
Right.
But back then they would. And, at Christmas time, my grandpa would come home and he'd have, pies and homemade candy and, homemade wine and pine stickle and all this other stuff that they'd get, and I think when my grandpa finally passed away and we got into the attic, I don't know how many grain elevator hats we threw out or, had disintegrated that once upon a time. These were probably really cool hats, but the bills and all that were just gone. There was nothing left of them. And they were probably just gifts that were just given to the train crews and that. So there's that aspect of railroading a lot of times that's not thought about, is that human side of, a crew coming into the small town, switching out or picking up a few of these cars and then making their way on down the railroad. And, the next day they're either coming back or, depending on that railroad schedule, if it was like a Monday, Wednesday, Friday going one way and a Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday going the other. So,
so are we running signalized? Are we running with track warrants? How are we operating out of the yard?
In my case, we're using Form 19s. So
Okay.
essentially, it's your train orders of where you're going.
Okay.
During a regular operating session, the dispatcher will set up that authority, but at any given time, that authority could change. The other thing about the local is it's not a fast-moving train, and that's something I kind of instill into my crews when they come to know that.
What's our track speed?
Track speed for local, I'd say, 15, 20 miles an hour, because you're talking a lot of these towns are 7 to 10 miles apart from one another. So you're not going to get up to, 40, 50 miles an hour and then bring it right back down again. That's more for your mainline trains and that. And so for the local, it's that kind of slow and easy going train. And I instill that or tell that with my crews too, that during a regular operating session, and we operate using a 3-to-1 fast clock. So essentially when we operate 4 hours, that's the equivalent of almost a 10-hour day, just shy of it. And that might be the only trains that they operate, is that turn of going from one location to a terminus and then back. And every time we operate the local, there's a little different feel for it. Some guys prefer saying, hey, I'm an eastbound train, but I'm already going to pull my westbound cars too, for when I come back, they're already set up for me. Well, that works. Other times guys are like, oh, I set up my westbound, but when I came back, I didn't realize I was going to have 15 westbounds to set out, and now these cars are potentially in their way. And so, there's that element in the session that you can't really plan for, and it's totally up to the crew to say what works for you.
Okay. So why don't you start pulling? And
All right.
at any point you want to chime in, just interrupt me, so while you start pulling your stuff, I'll start talking about my local and how I operate it. Go ahead, Bill.
I think Bill's got a question.
Yep.
I do have a question. Tony, first and foremost, Dale, PRR guy base. He says, I run early 1950s Pennsylvania Railroad and love running locals. He loved running locals. I was just wondering, on your, do you have the same crew for operators, or are they interchanged?
A lot of times I'll have some crew members that say, hey, I really like this job. They know the local requires a whole lot more switching than, that mainline train that might set out a car at yards where there's already a yard master. When you're that switch crew or that local crew, you're your engineer, you're your conductor, you're your footboard yard master. You're basically doing it all. And then on top of it, trying to keep yourself out from other mainline traffic that gets in the way. And it doesn't take very long during an operating session to know who's really good at the local and who's not. About the first time you hear those way bills hit the floor and somebody say, oh, darn it, or somebody say, you've got a train in your way, you need to get in the siding. Well, you need to wait. They need to wait. No, the local is kind of the low priority. The manifest train isn't going to wait for you. You need to get out of their way kind of thing.
Right.
And so there is definitely that, don't exceed your authority. If this is where you're told to go, you kind of need to follow that. Even if you say, well, there's nothing out here. yeah, yet, but there might be, coming around the bend, coming around the peninsula. My dispatcher's board and usually my train master, they have eyes of where everything is at, but that local crew doesn't really know what may be with them. And yeah, we have, I use just the little small walkie talkies. And so a lot of times, they'll be able to hear if they're listening, if something's coming. But a lot of times that chatter, if it's that local train and nothing's really coming at them, they're trying to just, tune it out for a little bit. So,
Well, the guys that my secondary question is the guys that come over, are they the regular guys that you have?
I usually have a crew of about 8 guys. With my railroad, 8 is a pretty optimal number. And then if you throw myself in there, then we got 9. But a lot of times during the operating session, I don't always operate. I may dispatch. I might be, the train master where I'm just, putting out fires where there's issues, taking notes, what's working, or if somebody says, hey, you've got points here that are sticking, or, here's a section of dirty track. I'm writing those things down because for me, I'm building this for my enjoyment, but I truly get that enjoyment when I'm sharing it with other people and seeing it come to life because I can't run 12 trains by myself. But,
Sure.
when I have friends over and I can share this, the same passion that we all have, that makes, a great deal of enjoyment for all of us. And so when the railroad runs well, everybody's winning on that. And that's a successful operating session.
Yeah. Here's a question for both of you guys. When did your layout get to the point you knew you wanted people over for an operation session? Or did you build it with that in mind? That's from Sparky 107.
Right from the beginning, I wanted my layout to be shared with others. I wanted to interact with other modelers, and I love operations. I love emulating the prototype. So I knew that to pull this off, I was going to need other operators other than myself. So kind of like what Tony says, when I'm in my session, I'm kind of stepping back. Even though lately I had to function as the dispatcher, I do walk away and float down here because I like stepping back and seeing the interaction of all the trains in this district here coming together. And it's enjoyable for me. I get the most enjoyment out of that. So I knew right off the bat, had to have the layout for other people to come over.
And I agree. I did the same for a layout that I had in my basement in the same spot for 14 years. The idea was to do operations, enjoyed that layout immensely. But when I thought, okay, I wanted to switch to DCC, did I want to convert that layout or did I just want to start over? And I thought, boy, having that, that opportunity just to start over gave me a whole lot more opportunities. My last layout was single deck. This one's double deck. So essentially I have double the amount of railroad in the same amount of space. But the other thing on the operating side was my last layout was double main line. And that was fun. But with double main line, you can really move a lot of trains. Having this layout be single track really adds a different element of operations because, well, you can't have I shouldn't say you can't have cornfield meets. You can, where 2 trains hit each other, but I tried not to do that. Instead, it's making sure somebody is in the siding and in the clear and that. The other thing that I did is even before scenery was done and it was just the rough layout of the track, the wiring there, I was already inviting not a full-blown session, but just a small session. And it wasn't so much operating the layout as far as, move cars in and out, but it was running trains and cars to debug the railroad. Where are there switches before I do any scenery that are causing problems? Well, let's take care of that now before I spend, hours doing scenery work and then come back and say, oh, I got to pull this all up because, these switches aren't good or this isn't working. And so the railroad really from its infancy to now has always had operators to some extent on it. And even the operating sessions, I think my crew would agree, have evolved. We've tried this. Oh, that worked really well. Oh, we've tried this. This has gotten better. And also sometimes going and operating on other layouts, you come home with some things that say, hey, this person did this on their layout. I could adapt that or make that work for mine. And so, picking up things from, clinics or other railroads you visit, there's always something you can add or I feel take away for a good operating session.
Very good.
I agree 100%. I have nothing to add. Tony hit it all on the head.
Do you guys run CTC?
What's that?
Do you run DCTC?
Centralized traffic control.
No. My hope is to signal the railroad someday, and it's going to be ABS. So
Absolute block signaling system.
Yes.
You don't understand.
That question was from Train Guy 1975. Sparky just made a statement, Joe, and I'll let you go into your end of it. Says Joe, he says, I would love to come over and do operations, but all that eye candy, I would be in awe and get nothing done. Conrail Blue, baby.
Big Blue.
So go ahead, Joe, your turn.
Okay, so while Tony's starting to get his stuff running, I want to preface one thing for everybody. While I'm running and while Tony's running, I want you to look at the individual areas. My layout especially, I can't speak 100% for Tony. Maybe he can chime in. A lot of mine are LDEs. So they're like little sections, okay? These little LDEs are perfect for you to emulate on a simple 4x8. I could take, even though I have a big layout wrapping around, I could take these little dominoes and cut them out, and they could be little 4x8s. So as you see me operating and you see Tony operating, just realize that this can be the same thing on your 4x8 down in your basement. The only difference is instead of me running the big long run from Brown's Yard up here, you would just do loops or laps and to click off mileage before you stop and do your first group switching. So just keep that in mind. Okay. All right. So what I'm doing here is, as you see my messy workbench, I'm swinging you over to freehold. So the way I run my layout is that it's serviced out of Brown's Yard in Sayreville, and then there's a large group of there's a group of trains that runs out of Sayreville.
Joe, your camera's pointing up.
Oh, sugar. Sorry, everyone. My fault.
Ron Class says LDE is layout design elements.
Yes. Okay. Is that better?
Yes, that's extremely better.
I had technical difficulties again.
That's all right.
So out of Brown's Yard runs a series of locals. The one local that we're representing here is called the WJSA 31. WJ is Way Freight Jersey Division. SA is the designation for Brown's Yard, and 31 is train number 31. This train, I'm running it in the 80s. So what happens is more different than how Tony runs his is by the 80s, the SA 31 was kind of like maybe 3-4 cars on a Monday, 2 cars on a Wednesday, and maybe 3 cars on a Friday. Very rarely they'd come down with a large group of cars and service all the industries at once. So that's kind of what I'm emulating here. And, Tony's talking about in the 50s with his grandfather where they were very service orientated. This was kind of the end of the service orientation of the railroads before it kind of got to the where it is now. From what I'm understanding now, Norfolk Southern likes to bring down large groups of cars to an independent operator and just dump them off and let them do the switching. So that's kind of where this has come into. So what happens here in Freehold is we have a team track and a lumber yard, and then the train will come down and service the industries and then make its turn to go back. So,
Joe? Yeah, I'm just coming to him. Joe and Donnie, Train Guy 1975 wants to know, now, are you HO or N scale? Plus, do you use NC
N scale
or DCC?
N scale, the only scale.
Both use N scale, and Tony, what do you use to power your trains?
NCE.
And Joe?
Digitrax.
Digitrax. Okay, there you go. Hope that answered the question, Train Guy 1975. So as they get this ready to do the operation, again, operation is key. I think is the adds the element to the layout. Uh, you can do it anyway, even if you have a figure eight, like Joe said, with the 4x8. Uh, you know, it can be done and incorporated. I think it gives it more. I think it gives it more excitement and more fun, and it gives you something to learn. You know.
On mine, uh, unfortunately, there's no focusing ring on this camera. Let me see if I could do this. Tell me if that gets better in focus. I think Tony's shooting on an iPad. Okay.
Train Guy 1975, he says, I'm familiar with Tony's layout. He has a really nice layout, and I do enjoy operating on it. Train Guy 1975, if you're an operator and you operate the local, at Christmas time, does Tony give you any gifts?
All right, so we're setting the handbrake here on my I-beam, and I'm going to cut this string off and run around my train because all these moves here are opposing or facing points turnouts. And I'm missing my, there we go. Okay.
Just done a Joe.
What's the matter?
I'm just gonna a subtext here. If you could explain just briefly what a facing point and trailing points are.
Okay, so we're going this way. So the trailing point is facing towards our tail.
Right.
It's the opposite way. Now, if I'm going this way with my locomotive, this would be a facing point. So it kind of depends on the direction the locomotive is running in.
Right. So if you're going the way you're pointing now, you'd be facing, and then as soon as you crossed over, they become the trailing.
Correct.
Okay.
And these are all facing in this. All the turnouts are in the same direction here in front.
Right.
All right. So our conductor's on the ground. Our brakeman's on the ground because now this has come up on my channel. Is I'm running 3-person crews because I work under the work agreement of the contract signed in 1984. Law locals still had 3-person crews, so I've left my brakeman here at the switch stand, and the conductor went down with the locomotive. He's going to operate that turnout, and then we're going to pull forward to complete our runaround.
Oh, I'm Train Guy 1975. I'm sorry, what was the question you had for me? The question I asked Train Guy 1975 was if you operated on Tony Bowen's layout and you operated the local, at Christmas time, were you given a fruitcake or candy or anything, from the local areas? Did Tony give you anything? Basically, like he said his grandfather did. That was what I was asking. Just curious.
All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop here. I'm going to pull my empties out. We need to pull our work order here. I got my weigh bills in hand here. Right here. I'll put these right here so they're out of the way. I've also brought my switch list, so I have all the work written down on my switch list. So per our switch list, we need to pull these 2 empties out of here. And then we got to swap this box car and pull this forward Conrail one as an empty. So we're picking up 3 and dropping 3. Okay. So what I'm going to do, while I'm in position here, I'm going to go ahead and pull my empties. And then I'll reconnect to my train and then put my loads in. Kind of cut down on the moves. Some people, there's some railroaders that are following my channel, and they've kind of taught me as I've gone and learned about this switching thing, is that you want to think like a conductor or a brakeman. You don't want to walk too much.
That's true.
No, actually, I'm talking to a guy who knows what I'm talking about because you worked on the South Brooklyn. You did switching.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I forgot.
No, that's quite all right. But whoever gave you that advice was good advice.
Yeah. So conductor's going to walk ahead and open that turnout so that we can clear the fouling point because right off camera. I'm sorry. I have a very narrow field of view on this camera. Down here is a turnout under the bridge, so I need to open it so I can get out of it. Pull a little forward. So I can pull forward so I can clear this turnout point right here.
Same guy, 1975, replied Tony. No, he did not have. He did have some Girl Scout cookies. He handed out one.
That is true. I've had 2 girls that have gone through Girl Scouts, and at operating sessions, we go through a lot of Girl Scout cookies.
There you go. Ben Murda, I hope I'm pronouncing that last one right. Your last name right, Ben. He says locals on Tony's layout are relaxing trains for seasoned operators. They do require planning to be a good job, or it can get troublesome fast.
Well, and Ben makes a great point because if the local was just a quick, easy job, they'd be done in a heartbeat. And
Right.
So I do want to make it so when you pull into a town, you kind of know maybe how you want to switch it. It's like a big chess game.
Right.
But also,
Train chess.
if my yard master in the Carnforth yard has done well, I usually make a little cheat sheet. So for each local, if he sets up the train in the order of the towns, that also helps the crews too.
Right. So Joe, you're switching out these 2, and are you going to replace it with full loads, or?
Yep. I still haven't done my loads. I'm sorry. You have to
Okay.
make pretend that those are loads.
Okay. No problem.
All right, so we're going to couple and connect. Now, both of these cars, the way I run my layout is that all handbrakes are set in the industries. Just an easier way of me remembering because I was getting confused. I'm like, oh, did I set the first one or the last one in the string? I don't remember. So I just said, you know what? All handbrakes will be set.
Joe, you know what the rule is? I know about in railroading. I'm not, but sufficient. The rule usually states a sufficient amount of handbrakes.
Yeah, and I read that in the NORAC handbook, and it's very that's interpretive. That's an interpretive rule, right?
That's exactly right. Obviously, it's a sufficient amount. So here's how the rule works out. If you put in if I lay up a train on level ground,
yeah,
and me personally, having worked that, I would say, depending on what the situation is, I would put sufficient amount. Now, sufficient amount for me would be 3 handbrakes, maybe the front,
okay,
the middle car, and then the last car.
Gotcha.
Now, if I'm on a grade, no matter how slight or how it varies, sufficient for me is all handbrakes are applied.
I got you now.
Now, I get off the train and you're coming on.
Understand.
You say to me, did you apply handbrakes? I said, of course I did. I can tell you where they are, but your job is to check every handbrake.
Okay.
It's not just, if I tell you, hey, Joe, I just dropped those 2 cars off and I put the handbrake at the end. You take my word for it. Why? Because me and you barbecued together. Me and you hung out together. We broke bread together. We went to AC together. You trust me. You go to the back of the car. You release the handbrake. You pull out. All of a sudden, you got sparks flying. Why? Because I neglected to tell you that I did put a brake on the second car.
Gotcha.
So you never assume anything in railroading.
So to make it easier in model railroading world, for me, was just to say everything is set when it's put in this
exactly.
spur.
Exactly.
And we got should have checked that couple. Coupling on a curve here.
Train Guy 1975, Joe, he asks, what is view on sound? What is okay. Joe, what is your view on sound?
Well, I love it. I think it makes operations that much more realistic. Makes it more interesting to watch. So I think sound is a must. I know I've talked about it many times on my channel. I've talked about it on our show together. I'm using Ed Kapuzinski's Train Crew app. And anybody who wants to go is interested in trying it, you can go to conrail1285.com, and he has a link right on his webpage. And the only drawback, and I've talked to Ed in the past, is that you have to run it from the website. So like what I'm doing right now is I have it bookmarked on my phone, and I'm using my internet window.
What is that web address again? Conrail what?
Conrail1285.com. I think it's a phenomenal tool, and I can't believe that Ed is so nice to us to give it to us for free. You don't have to pay nothing.
I posted it for you guys. I posted in the Q&A there, Conrail1285.com, if you want to go look at it. So that's what we do here at Model Railroading Live.
Provide information. I got a couple up. So our brakeman's on the ground. He's going to walk over there, couple up. I'm sorry, our brakeman's back here. Our conductor's going to walk over and couple up while our brakeman goes back to release this handbrake because we set that one.
Maurice Grimes says, Joe is absolutely right. That train crew program is a great enhancement to operating.
So what it does, if you remember, I'm just going to refresh everyone's memory, is that it does two things. Number one, it gives you those really cool sounds. You hear me hitting in the background, releasing the handbrakes and setting them and stuff like that. But it also adds the element of time to slow you down. So what happens is if I come in here and say, let's set a handbrake, I hit the handbrake, it gives you the sound, but it starts the countdown timer. And I have mine set to my fast clock of 4 to 1. So it's taking that amount of time and it locks it out. So I can't do more than one function at once.
Right.
Okay. It's doing it multiple times because I tapped it a bunch, but it's still adding the time. So it makes you slow down your operations because I find I watch some operators and I find that they tend to rush. Even, I'm not going to name names. There's some people who operate on my layout that I feel that they're just moving too quickly. If you notice, I'm creeping with this locomotive.
And as it should be. Safety first.
Safety first. And, some of the track that these crews were dealing with, it isn't the best of track, and you don't want to be moving these things around at like 25 miles an hour. You got to crawl it real slow. Right,
or else someone will be urinating in a cup for a long time.
That's right.
Hey, Walt World. I am so sorry, Walt. I am just so sorry I'm just busy. Joe, he says, what is the next big project for your layout? Always like watching your layout updates.
So right now, I'm painting buildings for that little section out in the family room, Dayton. Because I'm getting ready in a couple days, I'm going to shut down the layout and put everything away because we are going on vacation.
Nice.
We are taking Caitlin to Florida to go see Mickey Mouse.
Beautiful.
Nice.
Yeah, so it's going to be fun. I'm getting excited. So I'm going to paint some buildings up in the booth tomorrow, and then I'm going to shut everything down, put everything away, and wait till I get back, and then finish up that Dayton section with the full scenery. I've already started the Jamesburg and Englishtown. I'm putting the foam down. I did a Facebook Live a couple of days ago about it. So that's where we're looking at.
Good. And when are you leaving for FLA?
Tuesday.
Flying out to see the big rat.
Yeah, the big rat.
Say hello to him for me. I was there once a couple of years ago, and I was down by the merry-go-round.
Uh-huh.
I was sitting down, and the that's where the performers come out on that side, on the other side of the. If you've been there, merry-go-round, there's a building and acts like a door, and they come out from behind there, the characters.
Uh-huh.
So the Wicked Witch came out from whatever, and she came and she jumped in front of me to scare me. And I looked. She didn't startle me. I just looked at her and I said, "Lady, I'm married for over 40 years. You can't scare me." And the woman broke character and she started laughing and she ran back in. So my wife was sitting next to me, and I didn't see my wife for 3 weeks. And then after that, when the swelling went down around my eyes. But I'll be here all week, folks. Don't forget to tip your waiter.
All right, 1980. Turnhouse line from Frio Lumber. We're pushing back 3 car lengths to a stop. Two more. One more. One half 1980. All right, that's good right there. All right. So our conductor's spotted the cars where he wants to. He's going to go ahead and set some handbrakes. 2, to be exact.
Fine.
I'll lock that switch.
We are. I'm told to click the live button under the viewer. Because we're back streaming again.
How you doing down there, Tony?
My train is pretty much set out. My new train is made up. I had basically 5 cars that I needed to kind of move around. 4 of them are going with me. One was kind of an interesting load. It was a scale test car, so it was at the end of the caboose. And so it had to be set out for the grain elevator. And so essentially my train is still sitting in the siding, could be making air, and would be ready to depart.
Not bad. All right, 1980. One more.
Okay, we seem to be
One
back
half.
on. All right, so for those few minutes that you guys were out.
Oh. One connect.
Oh, where am I? That's
We'll release the handbrake on this boxcar, because this is the one we want to pull.
Okay, good. Well, so for the few minutes you missed, Joe was switching into his, putting the imaginary full load of lumber into the lumber yard. Train Guy 1975 says, I work for the CN, and when I do an operations session, I try to be as realistic as possible when spotting and pulling cars. Yeah, very good, Train Guy 1975. I agree with that. It adds a little bit more realism and authenticity to the operation, I believe.
All right, push back like 3 car lengths here. It's good right there. All right, we're going to set the handbrake. We're going to uncouple. All right.
Just tell me the part where we can go get ice cream and fudge on it. In doing this operation, I do have to say that there may not be, a lot of talking and on this session right now into Joe's training room, but there's a lot to be learned and to be taken in by this. For some of the guys out there that are new to the hobby or that are in the process of building your layout or looking down the road operations, this is a good primer. It shows you how it's done, and though it's confined to a video camera where you're basically, not physically there with Joe or Tony, but you're getting an idea of what is being done. And I have to say that it adds a little bit of excitement. It may not seem exciting, but it is. It really is exciting, and it really is interesting to do because it does give you a perspective of how, we're trying to compress working on a real railroad. I mean, obviously, we're working in an environmental friendly, room that's heated, air conditioned, whatever for the time of season, and we're not stepping over mud puddles or debris or left, stuff that's on the ground. Again, that's not what we're doing, but it does transfer the realism that you're trying to accomplish here. So
Sure.
Train Guy 1975 question for both: when you handle hazmat material cars, do you place them in a proper train placement?
I do, yes. I do when I do my operations, I do that. However, I haven't really instructed my operators because we're still in a lot of early portions of our sessions. So eventually I want the operators to start thinking about that. So what would happen is it's all based upon a chart that's given by the FRA, the Federal Railroad Administration. So there's certain hazard classes that have to be one space back from the locomotive, like a flammable, combustible, corrosive. Then there's certain cars that have to be more than 2 car lengths back from the locomotive. I know radioactive is one of them. Toxic has to be more than 2 cars back. And I believe, without looking at my chart, so if anybody out there knows, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think like an inhalation hazard like chlorine has to be at the end of the train.
And I would have to agree with Joe, because even at mine, some of the hazmats of the 1950s would be different. But if I'm setting up the train in the yard, I try to follow that. But if I have a different yard master than that, they don't necessarily follow that. But on some of my way bills, what I will do is put a little note. So like on the local I brought in, it had a scale test car. Well, you don't want to put a scale test car in the middle of the train. And so it needs to be, towards the end of the train. And so I'll put right on the card if there's a special instruction, or if it's a car that needs like a idler flat on either end or something like that, then I'll have that.
Yeah. So what I do on my way bills is I just highlight in yellow that there's a hazard class on there, and I put the actual DOT number on there just to help me so I know what it is.
There you go. Andy Crawford says, I had operated several layouts and was a member of a club with an operating layout. However, I worked as a yard hand for NS for a couple of months prior to my enlistment into service, into the military. It changed my operation. He continues to stay. The story I hear from most professional railroaders is how much we miss or skip when operating our layout. Some of that's not fun to recreate, but much of it could be. Well, I hear at the South Brooklyn Railroad, I try to accomplish as much realism as possible. So what I've done when we have operating sessions here is I've recreated, for instance, the restroom. I take the door off the bathroom and
Sorry.
I stick a lot of newspapers in the corner and I urinate all over them prior to operation. And then I turn the heat up, and then I let that cook a little bit so you get the smell of urine. And then I usually take apart the toilet seat so that it slips all over, and absolutely have no toilet paper whatsoever and no hand soap. So I want to recreate that realism that I myself had at times, and then for the snacks, I usually make this coffee that I get from my Hispanic friends. It's called Bustelo, but I burn it on purpose and make it like a paste, like a molasses, so that when it pours out of the thing, you absolutely have what it does cause is dysentery, some sort of you get the runs. So it works well with the realism of the bathroom and that kind of so that's what I contribute to my operating session. You guys have anything similar to that?
No. Oh. I have a feeling if I did anything like that, none of my crew would be welcome or want to come back.
Oh, I'm just saying.
So I tend to pass on that.
Okay.
So the other thing is, now that I'm all done with my switching, I'm going to go ahead and put the bills in the waybill boxes on the layout, update my switch list, and my train is turned and ready to go home now. You noticed the idling up of the locomotive towards the end there. I do use the train crew app to do the actual air brake test, and that usually takes about 5 minutes in real time, about 20 to 25 minutes on the fast clock, depending on how many cars you have, because the longer the train is, the longer it takes to air it up and do the tests. Then what you do is go through and you set your shoes, and they go down and inspect each car, verify the pressure on EOT, and they'll release, verify everything releases. And that's how you do an air test. So that's, a good 5-minute pause, good time to get your paperwork in order and get ready to go home. So,
Maurice Grimes asks, what determines how many cars were in your train to start?
Mine is totally random, because on my waybills, some of them I have colored dots, and reds usually mean it's a car that's going west, blue means a car that's going east. But I went to a clinic just a few weeks ago on operations. A gentleman was a BNSF yard master down in the Kansas City area, models the Rock Island and the Milwaukee Railroad in the 1960s. And he basically said, you know what, I like the colored dots idea, especially when it comes to those areas that are off your layout. But he said, why have the colored dots for the towns or the locations on your railroad? And that's the thing my crew was struggling with, is that I had all these colored dots, but we might be here at this town of Ladora, but as soon as we would turn the car's headed west, even though it needs to go to the next town down. So essentially, I took all the dots that were for the towns on my railroad, went back and pulled those off, and basically just thought, this makes total sense for the crews. Crews need to make that destination when they're out there to decide, okay, the car is flipped. Is it closer to go east or west when I'm making this car up? So essentially now, instead of having colored dots, I have either red for west, blue for east, or no dot at all, because it's a destination somewhere on the layout. You figure it out whether that car needs to go east or west as a crew. And, the guy who did this clinic, he basically said, don't make it easy for your operators. Give them that challenge so that they're actually spending more time operating. Don't make it so simple that it's, I'm switching this car, I'm switching this, and boom, I'm gone. Let them do some figuring out. Right. And you really start weeding out, as Joe said, people who switch too fast, and, I kind of go, that's not the way I would do it. But they got to figure it out on their own. And so this will be that same thing, figuring out where you want it.
Right. And, thinking, it causes them to think on their feet.
Right. Well,
Right.
and the other thing that I've done is, I've provided my crew a timetable, and so in our timetable we've got the trains, destination, all that, but then there is also a layout schematic when they're on, like the upper deck, and I don't know how well that comes out, the upper deck or the lower deck. So if it's somebody who's running that local, all they need to worry about is that one fold of where they're at, so they can tell, hey, is this a town that I'm going to go to east of me, and do I need to grab that car? So, and the other thing is, like Joe said, putting things in. With mine, I have the 5-section way box, so usually when a train comes in, this one is just to set your pack of cards, whatever's set out, what's on hold, what needs to be picked up, and then I've just got one for the depot, because when I look at my town, I have a grain elevator, I switched out a fertilizer plant, I switched out a tractor implement store, but there's also the depot that I could switch out, and then there's another feed store here. So even in this small town, there's 6 little industries, but I only had to hit 3 of them tonight. Another session down the road, it might be something for boom, 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 every one of them. So,
Okay. Yeah.
So that total randomness is what kind of makes fun. And
Yeah.
I think that's what the crew likes too is, last time I ran this local, that was easy. Now the next time, maybe it was a little more work for them. So
Andy Crawford makes a statement here. He says it's a balancing act for sure. Any game needs enough, in quotes, challenge to be that challenging and interesting, but not so hard as to request a paycheck or so miserable to risk digestive problems.
So
right.
what I have done is I've kind of set the layout through 3 cycles, and I know which cars are going to which industry, so I can kind of balance it out so I don't end up with trains that are too long or too short. And then what I do is I stopped blocking the trains out. I give the operators just a group of cars, and I give them a switch list. Now, Conrail didn't use switch lists. From what I understand, they use computerized printouts. So I'm kind of using this as the substitution for the printout. And so now they have their work. They know which cars are going where. And then if they want to block it out and take the time, or they can mix it up as they go along, that's up to them. So I kind of give them that challenge. The other thing that I've done and I'm working on right now is that I'm working on a 4th set of cars to change out. Every 4 cycles, I'll take one out of storage and put it on the layout and take one of those cycles off. So we're not seeing the same cars and adding more randomness. The other thing I'll do is I'll just randomly, when I'm the night before a session and I'm writing up those switch lists, because I do pre-print them for them, because I don't want to slow the session down with them having to write out their switch lists, is I come down and I'll pick a random couple cars and I'll put a paper clip on the weigh bill, because I only use the three bins right here. So, and mine just is for each industry. So what I'll do is I'll use a paper clip to represent a hold car. And so what I'll do is I'll throw a paper clip on it and tell the operator, hey, there's a hold down there at the Frio lumber yard because they didn't get time to unload it. So it's got to stay. So that's how I kind of mix them up and kind of slow them down a little bit. The other thing is I'll do is I've made up little customer request way bills. I use them a lot over in Ciba-Geigy where, hey, this car needs to go from building 108 over to 105. Can you respot it? So that's kind of another way. I mixed up one session where there was like 3 respots and 3 new cars, and that was received very well by the operators. So that's how I kind of mix it up and keep it look more random, but it is very organized, so I know I have enough cars going to each spot.
Very true. Very good. It keeps it mixed up and it keeps it entertaining as well as intriguing and challenging. So.
Okay, so I think we've done all the paperwork. I've gone over the paperwork. We've gone over use of sound, demonstrated everything. Tony, closing thoughts?
No, the local is still one of those things that I just enjoy running, and it always has that variety of, sometimes you're leaving with just a handful of cars, sometimes it's a monstrous train. but they're fun, and I like the randomness of it. And it's so does the guys that come over and operate on mine layout. So
Yes.
Go ahead, Joe. I'm sorry. Didn't
Okay.
mean to step on your toes.
So yes, I totally agree. I like the local switching operations because that's pretty much where the railroad's job is getting the freight to the customer, and I think this typifies there's a lot of road crews out there doing road runs, but there's a lot of crews out there on a daily basis going down and doing work, trudging through snow and blazing heat and rain to throw to turnouts to make these deliveries. So that's what I really get into. So the other thing is it's ever changing as I go, because last session I looked at one train, and what I'm going to start doing is I'm going to start cutting out blocks of cars and starting, instead of coming down and hitting every industry here in Freehold, I'm only going to say hit the lumberyard on one cycle, and then the other cycle will do press film. So I'm going to so that's what I like too, is we're manipulating the schedule as we go and finding out what works and what doesn't. So it's coming along really well.
Right. And in my case, with my local hitting multiple towns on its way, there could be a car that's picked up here but dropped off at the next town that I may not know about. That crew's got to make that call and that decision and so that adds a nice element that it's not just, these cars came out of staging and I'm going to drop ... and pick up ... So that's a good part of the local.
Cool.
Well, I have two comments here, and one of them is from Andy Crawford. He says, I've got jobs based on preference of the operator. Time trains are easy. Follow the pretty lights and go on green, or extras for operators who like when a wrench is thrown in it. Train Guy 1975 says, when we are at work, we work a yard. They sometimes have us mark up our own switch list. I think once you get more qualified as an operator, it would be cool to have a person mark up their own switch list. John Gill.
And I think that is definitely part of the operating session. If you have a crew that you can operate and are reliable and they come back time after time, the more familiar they get with the railroad, the better those operating sessions are. But, in our case, when it's a round robin situation where you might have 8 guys this time, but you might only have 6 the next time, it doesn't always pan out, and those same trains may not get ran. And the same is true that I think it does help that your experienced guys can handle those trains that are a little more challenging. Those guys that are still a little green, giving them those challenging trains, as Joe said, they're going to handle the cars a whole lot more. There's going to be a lot more moves. But I don't think that's wrong not to put them in those positions, because they're not going to get better as operators unless they get that opportunity. And so, I maybe it's the teacher in me, but a lot of times I'm thinking, you got to work with them. You got to help them. And then all of a sudden they start developing. They start seeing, hey, if I had this to do again, here's what I would do.
Exactly right. I see, CSX Rail Line Production says, I like the idea of the color coding for the location or a waybill. And I think that's, I think that's a good thing. And in closing, I have to add my own 2 cents here as I'm listening to you two gentlemen speak.
Just 2 cents. That's all we're going to get.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we got to split that. So we only get a cent a piece.
Yeah, basically. Yeah. All right. I'll give you 5 cents worth of it.
All right. There we go.
Now split evenly.
That's 2.5 cents a piece. I think the biggest component here, and I agree with both of you in your assessment, I think the biggest component here is the humanity. And it may sound really philosophical, but it truly has been my experience that whenever I've gone to operating sessions at Joe's and other people here and around Staten Island and the New York area, it's always that humanity component where I'm meeting new people. We may have the same interest and the same likes, model railroading, but we definitely all come from different backgrounds. And it gives us an opportunity to meet and talk and be like-minded. We may not agree on politics or religion or social ethos or whatever's going on out there, but we do come to a common ground when it comes to model railroading and doing what we do as an operation. And I think that's important. And I think that has what I've seen of late in the hobby is a lot of people getting out and, talking about it, interacting, meeting, and just getting out there to know people. And I would encourage anybody out there who is a lone wolf, which is fine. That's absolutely fine. But go look at a club. Go find a club, even if you don't join it and you can't afford to join it, for whatever reason. But go look at a club and talk to people, because what happens is you talk to somebody and the guy says to you, hey, I know this guy, Tony Bowen, that's got a layout. Maybe let me call him up and see if I can get you invited. And that's how it starts. Joe Desmond, does the same thing and anything. So I would encourage anybody out there who's listening to tonight's show that you just go out and find, because what happens is, like I always say, this hobby starts in the basement. Doesn't mean we have to live in the basement. We can get out and see the sunshine and talk. And I think that's what gives us that opportunity to do so. So with that said, I want to thank you guys. Joe Desmond, Into Joe's Train Room again is always interesting and fascinating. And Tony, as always, as we say here in New York, you're the man, bro. You're the man.
Thank you, Tony.
Thanks for coming on. Thank you for having me on tonight. I appreciate it.
No problem. Joe speaks highly of you. So any friend of Joe is obviously not a friend of mine, but that's another story for another time. But anyway, it was great having you on, Joe. And Joe's Train Room, obviously. And Joe, you'll be going on vacation. Will this be the last show of the season for us?
No, next month.
Next month, you'll come back.
We are going to do a wrap-up discussion. I'm going to try and get some guests lined up to come in, and we're going to talk and kind of just put all of this back together. Because don't forget, we had a couple shows with the track planner talking about, designing for operations. I've showed you a bunch of stuff over the last few months, and Tony showed you a bunch of stuff. So I'm going to bring everybody back together, and we're going to talk about it so that we can put it all together.
All right, good. So you'll have a great and safe vacation. Enjoy.
Thank you, sir.
Be well, and Tony, you too as well. You be safe out there and enjoy your summer vacation that's coming up pretty soon.
25 more school days. Yep.
25 and counting. It's always those last 10, Tony, that get you. It's always those last 10.
Yeah.
It's that they drag on for some reason. They just drag on. But anyway, tomorrow night, Thursday, April 18th, we have Johnny's Train Talk show, Johnny's Train Talk Room, where you guys are invited to come on into the general store, sit down with John and anybody else who's more than willing to step into the old general store there and talk about model railroading. It's open to everybody. You guys can get online like we're doing here if you so desire. If you have a camera and a good internet connection, you can get online and discuss everything that you want to discuss regarding what you're doing in the hobby, what you have a problem in the hobby, the switch won't work, the train wheels won't stay on the rail, whatever it is, or you just want to show off something that you're building and kind of like crow about it. That's what Johnny's Train Room Talk is. So the doors open up at the general store. Usually stays open from 7 a.m. till 7 at night, but he reopens about 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You guys can mosey on in and have a good sit down. And I think he's got some of that clear liquid that you can take out of the mason jar. I don't know, but you'd have to ask him. So anyway, he'll be on tomorrow night, and then he'll be on again next week. So we have two Thursday night this week and next Thursday, and that completes the month of April for us. We are coming up on the Easter holiday and Passover. So for all of you out there, a happy Resurrection Sunday and Passover to you. And once again, guys, thank you very, very much for being a part of this. And you guys out in the community, thank you. And to John, once again, thank you for your assistance in the directorial and production value, because without you, we'd just be seeing a blank screen here. And for you guys out there in the community watching us, without you, we'd be talking to dead air. So thanks again. God bless, and we'll definitely see you guys on the radio. Take care now.
Mama, coming home.